they have me turned on because I forget to turn it on.
Yeah, so they turn yours on?
They turn me on. They turn mine on for me.
Yeah.
Yeah, we'll turn it off for a few minutes.
Oh, I can turn it off as long as.
It is.
No, no, no. If we have Lohinos come on up, and I'm not sure we really need Mr. Williams or not at this point, but we do have a quorum.
He's officially sworn in and everything.
Yeah. And we'll have the other two sit down. And while they're on the way there, the next item is approval of the agenda. I'm going to make a motion on my behalf here to move 9D to the last item on the agenda just before adjournment, because we have most of the people here for 9D. Does anybody have a problem with moving that to the end of the agenda so that we can get everybody else out here more quickly? That's my motion. To have a second.
You said more quickly.
More quickly. I think at this juncture, approval of the agenda, with the exception of moving 9D to the last item on the docket, I would move to accept or to adopt the agenda. Do we have a second?
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? That will carry. Item number 3, public comment period. Anybody have any public comment for items that are not on the agenda today? Yes, come on up. And please state your name.
Okay. Hi, I'm Jolene Houseman, Executive Director at Fountain Valley Senior Center. Thank you for allowing me the opportunity to speak in front of you this afternoon. I appreciate the opportunity to voice some concerns regarding transportation for senior citizens and update you on some changes in the Colorado Springs region. Fountain Valley Senior Center is part of One Ride, One Click system. We are a provider of specialized transportation for senior citizens and disabled persons. We provide a high level of service, including curb-to-curb, door-to-door, and door-through-door service. In our last fiscal year, we provided 16,972 one-way trips. Some of our trips are funded through the City of Colorado Springs, which is partially funded through the PPRTA sales tax. Initially, when this project started, it included rides to the senior center and today programs for IDD individuals. As of January 1st, 2009, rides for these purposes through the City of Colorado Springs were no longer funded. We as an agency scrambled to find alternative funding. Senior centers are a vital part of daily life for the elderly population, allowing them to age in place. Senior centers provide transportation, nutrition, recreation, and socialization. By allowing seniors to age in place, we as a community save a minimum of $43,947 a year per participant for Medicaid. Fountain Valley Senior Center was very disappointed when we went to a trip purpose for reimbursement. Especially as the subject matter experts on aging, we were not even consulted in the decision. The seniors who utilize transportation services for congregate meals, shopping, and personal trips are the seniors who are most isolated due to losing the ability to drive. The availability of transportation from FVSC allows the senior to stay in their homes longer, maintaining their independence and self-worth. There is pronounced isolation factor in both southern and eastern El Paso County. Fountain Valley Senior Center was extended a second-year option. We are currently reviewing it and attempting to negotiate it. We have also reviewed the new RFP that the City of Colorado Springs released in regards to the call center and human service provider specialized transportation. I attended the RFP conference to ask more questions and clarify. We are potentially interested in applying and having 2 contracts. Fountain Valley Senior Center is a firm believer in the need for senior transportation and understand the complexity in delivering door-through-door service. I have concerns that I wanted to address with the PPRTA board regarding the new RFP. Under the new RFP, there is a potential that for-profit businesses will be delivering this service. It is my understanding that nonprofits were specifically delivering the service as we understand the needs in depth for our most vulnerable populations in our community. The majority of our mandatory APS reports come from our drivers who see the same people day in and day out. They notice changes in behavior, thought processes, and hygiene. They also build a great relationship and rapport with the clients, building trust with them to disclose abusive situations. Second, the current contractors were given the option to not collect the $3.50 fare, currently under the one-ride system. In the new RFP, the fee is mandatory. This is going to cause a great hardship for the seniors in the community. Because there are multiple providers in the one ride, one click, I have concerns that seniors can't understand that some rides will have mandatory fares and some will be donation-based, all out of the same call center. I have concerns that the majority of my seniors cannot afford mandatory fees. Thank you for hearing my concerns regarding not funding senior center rides, appropriate providers for the rides, and the fare discrepancies that are going to start July 1st.
Thank you. And could you please state your name?
Of course, my name is Gail Nels. I'm the CEO of Invita, and I am also a member of the call center. Thank you. Gail Nels, CEO of Invita, and also a member of the call center. I'm concerned about the contract as well. We are an agency that has served the community for over 50 years and been in partnership with the city, delivering rides to people with disabilities for over 25 years. Our contract under this one call, one click was terminated. There's a bit of a he said, she said regarding audit requirements. I don't think that's really important at this point. What I am concerned about is who we serve and how we serve them, because we work with this intellectual and developmental disability community. They have in their service plans, as legally mandated, in their service plans to get services, there is a requirement of, if the service is to be delivered, there is the agency named in the contract with the city, and rather the state. And so during this RFP process, if a new provider is to be delivering the services we were provided, it really takes about at least a month to 45 days, I would think, to honor that ride commitment from the parents of those with intellectual disabilities or the foster homes. So I'm concerned at the way that this was conducted as a community service. And I'd just like to support what Jolene has said, is we do believe we are the subject matter experts about how we're serving the community. And as I'd like to also add, our drivers do watch and take care of these vulnerable citizens. Just last month and 4 weeks ago, one of our drivers has identified a 18-year-old intellectual developmentally disabled girl that was being sexually abused, and we turned it over. And so that is the level of commitment we have this community. I don't want to appear self-serving. I do believe the model that I am bound to as a service provider, because of the way the federal funds and state funds have allocated vehicles, you know, the model that I live under is no longer cost-effective, and it can be done differently, and that's fine. But I would appreciate a smoother transition for those we serve. Thank you.
Is there anybody else who has public comment? I will make a commitment to ask that the Transportation Authority address this at a future meeting. And I see Mr. Easton nodding his head, and that will be done. And I do know that there has been movement to have the Mountain Metro present to City Council as well on this. So, does anybody else have any public comment for anything else that's not on the agenda at this point? We then move to item 4, approval of the minutes from May 8, 2019 regular meeting. Does anybody have any comments about those minutes? Do I have a second? All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed? That carries. Item 5, presentation of the 2018 audit. Mr. Logan, I believe.
All right. Well, good afternoon. My name's Kyle Logan. I'm the owner of Logan & Associates, the RTA's audit firm. I'm here today to present the results of the 2018 financial statement audit. And so in your packets, you received 2 documents. One are are the audited financial statements. The other document I refer to as the management letter. And so our audit process is kind of a one-step process where we come to the offices of the RTA and we pick samples of certain transactions to make sure that there's supporting documentation for checks that are being written by the RTA for services provided. We also compare the transactions being paid that relate to the capital projects to make sure that they are actually paying for projects that have been approved in the two ballot issues. And so in that process, that's part of us testing the internal controls. We test them to get an understanding to make sure that policies and procedures that have been put in place by the RTA board and prior boards are being followed by staff. We also confirm certain balances. For instance, the cash and investment balances with the outside financial institutions. We confirm the state sales tax revenues with the Department of Revenue. We also confirm a lot of the bus fare-related revenues with the City of Colorado Springs. And then thirdly, we do analytical type procedures, just looking at the numbers, making sure that they are materially correct as of the end of December 31st, 2018. And so after we do all that process, then that gives us and gives me a comfort level in order to issue an opinion on the financial statements. And so the financial statements, all the numbers in the document, all the footnote disclosures in the document, their responsibility of the RTA's management. Our responsibility as your independent auditor is to issue an opinion on those financial statements. And so at the independent auditor's report, which follows the table of contents, is a two-page document, which the most important paragraph in that 2 pages is at the top of page B, where it's the opinions, and it's an unmodified opinion for the year ended December 31st, 2018. In layman's terms, that means it's a clean opinion. So that is the best that the RTA can receive from an independent auditor. What does that tell you as a board? That tells you that all the financial statements and all the financial information in this document and all the footnote disclosures are in accordance with generally accepted accounting principles for a governmental entity. So I'll just kind of break down the financial statements. Basically, there's 4 parts to the financial statements. Following the independent auditor's report is the management's discussion and analysis. Then you have on pages 1 and 2 are the government-wide financial statements. Pages 3 and 4 are the fund financial statements, which that is what you are used to seeing throughout the year, followed by the footnotes, and ending the report with the required supplementary information, which is primarily the budget that the board adopts in December for the following year. And so some highlights, primarily the government-wide financial statements and the fund financial statements are identical. And so in there on pages 1 and 3, which is your balance sheet, the RTA ended the year with about $164 million in total assets, which is about a 16% or $22 million increase over last year. And of course, most of that is tied up in cash and investments. So your cash and investments increased by about $21 million over the prior year. Your liabilities are about $14 million. And again, those are claims against those assets, which those actually went down by about $2 million from prior year, leaving the ending equity of about $150 million. And so as the way in the beginning years of the RTA being set up, primarily the RTA's entire equity is restricted. It's either restricted for the capital projects, for maintenance projects, and for transit projects, and then, of course, the Tabor Emergency Reserve. And so your capital projects, that restriction increased about $12 million over last year, which is at about $103 million. The maintenance projects those increased by about $9 million, so they're about $22 million at the end of 18. And then transit increased about $3 million to approximately $21 million. So that kind of is how the equity or the net worth of the RTA is divvied up as far as the restrictions on those funds. Okay, pages 2 and 3, or 2 and 4, I'm sorry. That is primarily the income statement of the financial statements, and so your revenues ended at about $112 million, which is approximately a $4 million increase over last year, and two significant components of that: sales tax increased, and your interest earnings on your investments increased because rates are becoming more favorable. And so you actually more than doubled your interest earnings in this past year. So a combination of the increase in your cash and investment balances combined with the increasing rates is a big factor. So that's helpful. Your expenses, about $87 million. So that's a decrease of about $29 million, which is 25%. And how that's divvied up, your new capital projects, they increased about 46, or they're about $46 million, increased by about $2 million. However, the old or the original projects for capital, those are about $1.5 million, which was an increase of about $20 million over prior year. Transit went down about $1 million to $11 million, and maintenance was $6 million less at about $28 million. And so a couple significant things in there. In the old projects, you guys were wrapping up the Woodman Phase 3. That was a significant amount of the revenue or expenses in 2017. And then the Mark Scheffel Mesa to State Highway 94. Those were two projects that pretty much wrapped up in 2017. As far as the new projects or the renewal projects, the Academy Avenue was one of the significant projects at about $6.4 million. The Cottonwood Creek Bridge project was about $7.6 million. And the West Colorado Avenue, which is your biggest project going on, was combined about $11 million. So again, as we go through our audit process, we're looking at these transactions. We're looking at the individual payments that are being presented by the member governments for the RTA to pay, to make sure that, okay, these are either for transit, for maintenance, or they're for one of the qualified projects. So the fact that, we can issue a clean opinion tells you as a board that, again, as I mentioned, the policies and procedures that you have put in place are being followed by staff. And it allows for the financial statements to be fairly stated as of the end of the year for December 31st, 2018. So that concludes the presentation on the financial statements. My management letter that I issue, our professional standards require certain things by us to communicate to you, the governing board of the RTA, and so that's what the purpose of this letter is. And I will say, I may have said it last year, but I will say again this year, it's kind of a boring letter this year because there wasn't anything significant happening as far as best practices that we would bring up or policy and procedure issues. And so again, that tells you as a board that policies and procedures that have been put in place are being followed. And so we did not have any audit adjustments. So that also tells you that the numbers in this document are the numbers that you have been seeing throughout the year. And finally, I want to thank Beverly and Rick for their time. It makes our job a lot easier. They have the hard part of hunting down information and providing us answers to questions that may have occurred well over a year ago when we're performing our audit. So we appreciate their help because it really makes for an efficient process. Any questions?
Well, boring is good. Thank you. Anybody have any questions for Mr. Logan? Do I have a motion to accept the 2018 audit?
So moved.
A second?
Second.
All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? None, so that carries. Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you.
Item number 6 is the Citizen Advisory Committee month. Oh, before we get to that, Reb, I'm sorry. I have a note here that says, since Yolanda Avila is not here, I would note that Richard Scorman is an alternate from City Council, and Richard Scorman is here for Ms. Avila today. Now, Reb, if you want to come up and present the Citizen Advisory Committee report.
David, when did you want me to make this motion?
Oh, did we skip that? It's the next one.
Okay, thank you.
You got to jump in because you got to be the right Williams to make the motion.
Good afternoon, Board. My name is Red Williams, Vice Chair of the CAC. The Chair is in Albuquerque, New Mexico, and the second Vice Chair is in surgery. So, I'm sorry you're stuck with me again. I actually looked forward to some of these meetings, not all of them. Monthly report, there were no public comments made. We got monthly financial reports from Bev. Thank you, Bev. They're even better this month. PPRTA 2, we asked for and got a list of capital projects, their status, as much as anything. And it was an information only. City of Colorado Springs requested approval for an IGA between the City of Colorado Springs, UCCS, PPRTA. For PPRTA, partial funding of the Spine Road through UCCS. Approved, positive recommendation was approved by a vote of 13-2. Yes, I was one of the dissenting votes. City of Colorado Springs, request for approval of an IGA between the City of Colorado Springs, CDOT, PPRTA, and PPRTA. Partial funding of landscaping for Cimarron I-25 interchange, also approved a vote of 13, or recommendation by a vote of 12-3. I was still a dissenter, and that's for professional reasons. See, 7, 8, well, 8 was actually divided. 7, we approved a line item transfer from Academy to the Academy reconstruction from Fountain to Milton Proby Parkway to pedestrian transportation improvements, and that approved 12-2, and I did not dissent on that one. And then number 8 was divided or bifurcated, and that was done because of anticipation of the way the vote might go. And the division of it was divided, the bridge from America the Beautiful Park was approved by, very narrowly by a vote of 8-7. And then the additional funding, additional funds for the downtown improvement projects, which is basically Remigio from Cascade to Sierra Madre, and that was a vote of 9-6. Those two did have positive recommendations, but they were very, very close votes. We approved a positive recommendation for all contracts, all 4 contracts presented by the El Paso County, and the balance was all for informational only. I'm just looking at this. Oh, no. We have a recommendation to approve a letter of support and construction budget of $18 million, and they wanted a budget increase of $2.5 million. That was El Paso County is requesting a build grant, which probably has some acronym, the way it's... Don't ask me to remember what it was. And then the balance were all information only, and we appreciate the time offered by the city government people, and I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Does anybody have any questions for Mr. Williams? Can I get a motion?
Move to accept the CAC monthly report.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That motion carries. Item number 7, I understand Ms. Ivy is going to present it, but that Ms. Williams has some comments to make about this.
So item 7 is on here.
that there was a bit of a miscommunication or misunderstanding in the appointment process through the city's processes vis-a-vis the establishing IGA. In essence, what occurred is that on May 8th, Mr. Williams joined the PPRTA board and participated in the meeting. He had been advised before that he was going to be or was appointed to the PPRTA board as the city's representative, but the city council's formal action on that didn't occur until May 14th. So in abundance of caution, since Mr. Williams so zealously motioned several times at the meeting last month, I advised Rick and your leadership group that the most cautious approach would just be to ratify the actions from last month. It is important to note that there were not any contentious votes or close votes where we could argue that Mr. Williams changed the outcome of a vote, but that's my recommendation to the board.
And I understand, Commissioner Williams, that you're the one who wants to talk to us about ratifying what your husband did after the fact.
So I will make a motion, and I will just point out, honey, that this is only for these actions, not for anything else that occurs at home. I'm still the boss at home. I'm going to move that we ratify all item approvals that we did from the May 8th board meeting as they were presented on May 8th.
Does anybody have a second to Ms. Williams?
He cannot second it.
I mean, he cannot second it.
I'll second.
All in favor, say, Mr. Giray has a comment to make.
I just need to abstain since I was not at that meeting.
Okay.
I believe it's appropriate for me to vote.
Okay. So Mr. Giray will abstain. All in favor of ratifying Mr. Williams' conduct, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? That carries, and for the record, we've asked Ms. Ivy to make sure that when you speak, now, Mr. Williams, that it's an appropriate time to speak. Item number 8, Ms. Majewski has the monthly financial reports.
Good afternoon. We received the April sales and use taxes yesterday, and we have almost $9.1 million compared to a budget of $7,898,000. So we were $1.2 million ahead of the monthly budget, or 15.2%, and we are ahead $3,188,000 year-to-date for the first 4 months, or 10.6%. On page 2, we compare the actual this year to the actual year-to-date last year, and we are ahead of last year, $1.84 million, or 5.86%. The rest of the pages are the financial statement, the revenue and expense summary, and there's nothing of special note on those pages. Does anybody have any questions?
Other than wow.
Yeah.
Any questions for item 8A? Item 8B is an approval item, the fiscal year 2019 budget amendment presentation, and I think the approval item is to set this for public hearing. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay.
So today, the board, we're just asking to set the public hearing date to July 10th, 2019 at 1:30. But today is our workshop, and I'll go over what actually is changing the budget, and it is on page 1 of the budget document. And then you may have the member governments come up and give a presentation unless you feel that you don't need that presentation. So it just depends.
Does anybody want the presentation to be made? The packet is delivered. It doesn't look like we're going to need the presentation, so if you want to do a summary and then...
I'll do a summary, page 1. So we just, basically what the amended budget does is it brings over the revenue over budget from 2018, and then any unspent funds in each of the capital projects, and then generally maintenance for each of the member governments. So we had a net sales and use tax that was ahead of last year's budget of $4,649,000, and then interest earnings that was over budget by $1,681,000. administrative savings of $241,000. So we bring that back into the budget in the following year. We don't carry over any admin funds. So we had 2018 revenue over budget of $6,571,000. And then transit farebox and advertising revenue was ahead of last year's budget by $444,000. So then the capital is 55% of the $6,571,000 because the transit fare and advertising revenue just flows through to transit. And that was $3,614,000, which is going to the I-25 GAP project per the voters' approval. So that won't be taken into any other project except for that one in 2019, and we will write a check to CDOT for that amount. Then maintenance allocation is $2 million, almost $2.3 million, and transit, the 10% is $657,000 plus the $444,000 of the farebox revenue. And those amounts then are reflected in the column of this budget where they allocate it to certain areas. So that is on page 2, 3, and 4. But the first column would be the expenditure carryover, which are the unspent budgeted funds from last year by project. Then the revenue carryover, which we just talked about. And then the next column is the original 2019 budget that was approved last December. And any line item transfers are in that second to last column for a total budget. And this document's pretty self-explanatory. If you approve any more line item transfers today, they'll be reflected in the budget that you receive to approve next month.
Okay.
Are there any questions for me?
Seeing no questions, can I get a motion to set the public hearing for July 10th at 1:30, correct?
So moved.
Is that the correct date, Beverly? July 10th at 1:30?
What did I say?
I think you said that. I just want to make sure.
It's up front.
Yes, it's right.
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you.
I have the motion. Do we have a
Okay.
second? You can second if you want, Mr. Williams.
Second.
All in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? That carries. Then 9C is the PPRTA 2A list capital projects update.
So we received a request from several board members to go over, to have a summary of the second capital A list and go over our progress towards that. And part of the thought process is so that you all can have a good idea of when you want to go out to the voters for the third capital project list as you get closer to the end of this 10 years. So there's a spreadsheet on legal paper that has original estimates when the ballot measure was the projects were determined. And then the third column is what the estimate is today. And then each of the columns after that are the actual spent in each of those years to come to a total spent to date. And then any difference is just what we have, what the estimated project budget is compared to what we've spent to date. The green lines represent projects that are substantially complete. We might still have some expenditures out there, but for the most part, those projects are complete. So in the end of this, all these lines will be green. And each member government has their own section. Then the next report is from Mike Chavez, and it is, they're his numbers going forward as to how he's going to spend the money for each of these projects and when those will, and what years that'll be spent in, and he'll talk about that. And then after that, there is, from El Paso County, from Jennifer, there is a written report about, for each of the projects as to the status of those. And so Mike and Jennifer will present their reports. And do you have any questions for me?
Any questions on item 8C? Seeing none, thank you. we now go to item 9A, City of Colorado Springs, request for approval of IGA between
Dave?
Colorado...
Mr. Chair,
Oh, Mr. Williams, I'm sorry.
when you said any questions, I was thinking that was the lead-in to the presentations from the respective jurisdictions.
Okay, we can certainly go ahead.
But
Mr. Chavez?
if there, because I think this is critical.
Okay.
So thanks.
Mike Chavez, City Engineering. My presentation is pretty quick. So what Rick is handing out is a larger version, a readable version of the list that's in your packet. Let me grab mine real quick. So what I have here is basically the funding on all the A-list projects, and I've got the funding to date in the second column. And then 2020 to 24, it's just kind of a rough allocation that we anticipate to finish out the projects. And what I did on that allocation for 2021 and 22 is I try to keep it under 36 million. This year's our capital budget was about 39, but I didn't want to max it out just in case there's a dip in the revenues. And so what that does is that it has us funding the named A-list projects pretty much fully by the end of 2022. And then 2023, there's a couple of projects that need to still have some funding. That's the I-25 ramps at South Nevada and the railroad bridge over Fontanero by right next to I-25. And I also did include the $2.7 million payback that we have to give to the county. So what this shows right now is in 2023, we've only identified about $10 million of spending, and we have not really identified any projects for 2024. Before you get all excited, what this allows is if there is a slowdown or a major slowdown or increased costs, which we've been experiencing, we can push some projects out and not break the bank any particular year. I've also reflected on the total, the actual cost of finished projects and maybe expected increased cost, as in the Academy, South Academy projects. They originally were 15 million and 3.8, and I just put in an estimate of 20 million and 6.4, just to anticipate the costs that we've been seeing. And again, that still allows us to budget out those 3 years under 36 million and have a cushion. So what we are looking at is we should be able to finish the A-list by the end of the RTA term, basically, and I'll bring this real quick. This is just kind of a graphical representation.
You're an engineer, you can figure that out.
This is pretty
That's going to leave a mark.
This is, again, a little bit bigger version. So basically, we have 20, 22, 23, 24, and the big power plans what I show is that by the end of 22, we'll have 6 projects left to finish out, which is, we'll have completed about 80% of the projects. And then by the end of 2023, we'll only have 2 projects left. So by the end of 2023, we're looking at having about 93% of projects done. Of the named projects. The program projects will be funded every year. Emergency Bridge Fund. So this is more of just a graphical representation of what we anticipate getting done and when. And then we're going to be providing more detailed quarterly reports on progress starting probably.
Mr. Williams.
Yeah, Mike, I appreciate this. As I look at the list, it does have down at the bottom one of the concerns I had, which is we were spending a lot of money on the vague projects. So I look specifically at the citywide road safety, traffic and operations and maintenance, and it's nearly double from 8 million to 15 million. And I guess from my perspective, I would want us to concentrate on B-list projects before we put any more money into a category that was not as specified in front of the voters, because I think we do need to show that B-list actually meant something in the process. And so I know we've diverted some money over there. I would not be in favor of any more significant diversions to the two categories, the intersection improvements and the roadway safety, that are already substantially over what they were projected at. Because I don't want anyone to be able to accuse us of a bait and switch. And so we said we would get the A projects done. Those look like they're done to me. And I would like us then to concentrate on the B level for the funds that may be left in 23, 24.
Okay, that will depend on whether all the member governments projects are fully funded. And that's something that Bev, Rick, and the board will have to decide at what point that they think that is appropriate, and then we can move on to the B list.
And then as a new member of the board, have we identified when we would begin that process of looking at prioritizing that fairly lengthy list of B projects? Because I think it's fairly clear we won't get them all done.
I'm not sure that that has been done. We can ask the member governments to do that, I suppose, but it is up to the member governments, would be my understanding, and I'm seeing a head nod from Mr. Sonnenberg. I would like, if that is in fact going to be something that is going to be presented by the member governments, I would actually like to see the priority of the B list with regard to also traffic safety and the other things, because that's part of the PPRTA approval as well.
Yeah, and so, and I'm not saying I'm just saying at some point we ought to set a time frame to say maybe by the end of 2021 they're telling us what they would anticipate doing. And I'd be interested in getting feedback over the next little while from the member governments as to when a realistic time is to start looking at that, because I know there's a lead time for these projects. We can't wait to 2024, 2023 to do them, because you have to start with the acquisition of property and other things.
We can definitely come up with our recommendation on priorities or our side of the projects.
Okay. Ms. Williams.
So part of this question is, if we do decide to go back out to the ballot, do we have to do that in 2022 or 2024?
My
Either.
understanding is yes.
Okay, but not, obviously not past 2024.
Mr. Williams.
If I might, the reason past board chose to do it a couple years ahead of time is there is an enormous amount of administrative process you go through if you have to close and if you have to complete things and if you're shutting down. And so I would definitely say we should not wait to 2024. We'd want to do it in no later than 2022. That also gives you the possibility of, if you got the list wrong and the people said no, you to go back and revisit it.
My own perception is the same as yours, is we really should be looking at 2022 to get this on the ballot if we're going to go back that way. Any other comments from Mr. Chavez on item 8C? Seeing none. Ms. Irvin, were you going to present the county's perspective on item 8C? Okay, thank you.
Jennifer, good afternoon, Mr. Chair and Board of Directors. Jennifer Irvin, El Paso County County Engineer. I just want to begin by saying thank you for having this discussion, because as we look at the future of this program and how wonderful PPRTA has been for our region, we want to make sure that we start early if we are thinking about reauthorization, because it does take time to get those projects together. And the more lead time we have as member governments, as we know some of those projects, we are going to be able to do some better estimates. So I really do appreciate the board's thoughts in regards to this. And so I want to briefly go through the county's projects and kind of provide some good explanation, because I do know that there is some concerns as you look at the project balance sheet in regards to the spending that the county has done. Because if you look at the spending from a county standpoint, I think we're at about 11 or 12%. I'd have to look, but and if you compare that to the other jurisdictions, you could perceive that we're behind on our projects. But what I want to impart to you today is that the actual spending of the project doesn't always reflect the progress made on those projects. And I'll tell you a little bit why, and I'm trying not to get into too much detail here, but do want to talk about that. So we do have a significant carryover for El Paso County. I just want to point out that we have 15 capital projects on our project list, and we have 4 joint projects, and 2 of those projects are being led by the City of Colorado Springs. So essentially, we have 13 projects from the county standpoint that we are doing. Just also want to note that over the course of the PPRTA, the county has also supported some of the other jurisdictions in making sure that their projects get done. Last year, we supported REMA in making sure that their project get done, and it worked out very well. And then also currently under construction is one of the Green Mountain Falls capital projects. And so we're very excited and happy to help the other member jurisdictions and make sure that we make the most of the PPRTA funds. So in regards to our projects, just wanted to mention 2 of our projects are currently under construction. As you well know, Colorado Avenue and Monument Hill Road. Both of those will be completed or substantially completed this year. The Highway 10, those are 2 in the construction phase. Sorry, lost my place. We have several projects currently in design, and what's unique about these projects is that we have several projects that are being designed either with county staff or with funding with County Road and Bridge and federal funding. So on those 4 projects, we have gotten those projects along. Those 4 projects are planned to be advertised this year and go to construction. And so that is why you're seeing some of the lag behind as far as some of the actual spending from the county, because 4 of these projects have been designed in-house. And so we have not spent any design money or a very small amount. And so all of the funding for those 4 projects will go to construction. The next project that is actually currently in the design phase is our Highway 105 project. And last month I was here talking to you about some additional funds for final design for the first phase. And that's to make sure that we look at those access points and get that done right. We had expected to go to construction this year, but we, I think, smartly held that back and want to do the right thing and make sure that we reevaluate those access points. Next month I will be coming to you with a final design contract for the remainder of that project. So we phased that project, and so the final design will be getting underway here this year. Also wanted to talk about the other 3 projects that we have currently in the design phase. One of the large projects that we have, $18 million, and is our South Metro, the next phase of our South Metro accessibility study completed by the city and the county in 2004, and that is the South Academy Boulevard project. And I will be talking to you about that later today in regards to the build grant, but we're going to do a kind of innovative contracting method in coordination with CDOT. So next month I will be coming to you with a design contract for that, and then later this year we will be getting that under contract for construction. So we're accelerating that project. That was something that we actually had planned to do a design build, but now that we have an opportunity with this, with CDOT, we're gonna do something a little bit different. But I think we'll still be accomplishing that project very quickly. We also have another project that is under design, Beacon Light Road, and I just want to talk a little bit about that because that project is has some impacts as far as the gap. We are actually talking to CDOT right now in regards to the gap, and there's some discussion about trying to find funding for the County Line Road I-25 interchange that was not included in the I-25 gap project. So we're looking at doing that. But what I would say about this project is that we'd actually done some preliminary design in-house for that project very early in preparation for PPRTA extension. And we have a preliminary design done, corridor planning done, and we have done some preliminary design. And so we are ready to get into some final preliminary design and final design very soon, and we do want to do that. But we want to make sure that the connection at Old County Line Road and how that connects into the interchange makes sense. So we're continuing on with that work, and we will be coordinating with CDOT, but we also will be accelerating that and probably finishing up the design with the contractor rather than doing it in-house. So that one is well on its way. And then also Eastonville Road. We have an adjacent developer out in the Falcon area who is doing a lot of work, and we are that developer has some shared responsibilities on that project, and so we are coordinating with that developer. He has a design engineer under his metro district, and we are working with him to see which part of the design that their company can do to save the PPRTA funds, and then which part of the design the county will do. So we are working with them. Any part of the scope that they are unable to complete, we will be contracting that out. But we are moving on that project and anticipating that we'll be commencing that design here this summer. I would also say we've had some utilities going on out there, so we've already done some initial design work from county staff to make sure that the electric utility goes in there in the right place. So I feel really confident that that project will move along pretty quickly. And then finally, projects that we kind of really haven't started but anticipate to start in 2019 or 2020. Mesa Ridge Parkway. This project actually has a 30% design stage already as it is today, and anticipate that either late this year, but I really put in the memo early next year, we're going to do a design build contract on that project. 2 lanes were already completed by a developer out there. They've already dedicated the right-of-way for us, so we feel pretty confident that we'll be able to move on that project quickly. And just, that is one of our other larger projects. I think we have $10 million in our budget for that project. And then finally, a couple smaller ones, Stapleton Briargate Boulevard project. That is actually just a corridor study. There's $1 million set aside for that, and we are going to be commencing that next spring, and that'll probably take about a year. So, and then our Deer Creek Base Camp Microscope Way, those are up in the monument area. Those are smaller projects, and those roads are going to be impacted by closures on the I-25 gap project. So we are kind of stepping back, taking a look at those and seeing what we want to do with those. My staff is doing core drilling on those roadways to see how best to approach that project. But all in all, that's a very small project and represents probably like maybe 1% of our overall budget. So hopefully we're showing to you that we are have a good plan for these projects to get them underway and in the construction phase by the time we go back out for requests to the voters. Any questions on those projects?
Any questions? Do you, Mr. Williams?
I appreciate both county and city staff doing this. I think this is an important part for us. This isn't so much of a question, more as a general statement. When I look at, the 2019 annual report and see 7 blue dots of the 71 projects, that's not where we need to be in a couple years. Mm-hmm. And so I'm glad to hear that we have reports and that there are plans for doing this, because I think it's critical that, and no offense to my friends from out in northeastern El Paso County, but one of the 7 is theirs, so I'm not even sure that some of my neighbors know where that is, although I do. And so thank you for doing that. I did have So there are two projects that are still shown, at least in the 19 annual report, as incomplete from PPRTA 1. And you're addressing the Meridian Road as part of the current project that's being built, correct?
Yes, so if you look at the Meridian Road South, what we did is we tied that together with a PPRTA 2 project, because essentially there wasn't really enough money for that. So we have some federal dollars for that project. We have RTA 1 money, RTA 2 money, and County Road and Bridge money. So that is one of the projects that was designed in-house by county, that was contracted out with county funds and federal funds. And we are doing property acquisition, anticipate advertising this year still.
Okay, thanks. And then if Mike, if you could give us a report on the one city project that was still shown as undone in the 19 annual report.
So there is about $4 million left of RTA1 that was been directed to the North Mark Shuffle project, which is a big one from North Carefree all the way to Black Forest. And so last year, or the year before, we came to the board with prioritization of how we would spend the money, and the first thing was to finish the bridge, Mark Shuffle Bridge over Sand Creek. And that's going to pretty much use the rest of the money up, and we've got a contractor on board, negotiated a price, and we'll probably be starting construction probably in July.
Okay.
I forget, I think it's 4 or 6 months construction.
Thanks. It's also showing Pikes Peak Greenway as incomplete.
They have like 40,000 left that they'll be using. There's a little carryover, so that'll be used up.
If we, do you know when we'll get that used up by?
I believe I talked to Parks, and they have plans. They're pooling that money with some others, and I think they'll get some done. I don't know if it was this summer or fall, but they've got a project lined out that'll use it up.
Excellent. Thank you.
Any other questions for either Mr. Chavez or Ms. Irvin on item 8C? There are being none. Thank you. 9A, Mr. Chavez, the City of Colorado Springs request for approval of the IGA between Colorado Springs, UCCS, and PPRTA.
Good afternoon, Mike Chavez, City Engineering. So in April of this year, the board approved up to $1 million for the Spine Road project in a partnership with UCCS, pending approval of an IGA between city, RTA, and the university. So we are bringing that for your approval. The IGA has been reviewed by city and RTA staff and the university staff and their counsel, legal counsels, and RTA's legal counsel. So we have come to agreement on an IGA and the wording and all the conditions. So we are just asking for the board to approve the IGA.
And Ms. Ivy, my understanding is that you have approved the form of the IGA for purposes of the PPRTA.
I have.
Thank you. May I have a motion on item 9A?
Move approval.
Second?
All in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? 9A carries. 9B, the City of Colorado Springs request for approval of IGA between Colorado Springs, CDOT, and PPRTA for partial landscaping at the Cimarron I-25 interchange. Mr. Chavez.
Similar situation, we have had the board approve partial funding of this agreement with the CDOT for the landscaping of the Cimarron interchange. CDOT was short on funds when they were building the interchange, and they were just going to rock it basically. And so in an effort to get a little bit more aesthetic look, they said if we or somebody could find $1.5 million, they could add it back in. So we have come to an agreement with CDOT to fund $1.5 million of that. Half of it city funds, the other half is RTA funds. And the budget has been approved for the RTA portion, and again, we just need an IGA to be executed in order to pay them. And similarly, this has been reviewed by the different staff and legal counsels.
And again, Ms. Ivy, you have reviewed this and approved the form.
Yes.
Thank you.
Move approval.
Second? All in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? 9B is carried. Item 9C, City of Colorado Springs request for capital projects line item transfer academy reconstruction to pedestrian transportation improvements.
Okay. I have, do we have that on, was this loaded up? Okay, no. There it is. Oh. And I need to full screen. Okay. So we have a request, or we had a request that we postponed. We were looking for a line item transfer to put some funds from the Academy project into the Van Buren Safe Routes to School project. But as we were going through that, we realized that this project also does do, it reduces lanes, Van Buren between, let me see if I can drive this thing. So we have a project, it's a grant project that we received back, I think about 2014, for $244,000 to do a project along Van Buren from Temple Gap to Circle, basically. And we were awarded in 2013. That section of Van Buren has 2 elementary schools, a middle school, and a private school. And the grant was to improve the system for people on bikes, walking, and vehicles. So the limits again are from Temple Gap to Circle. And in order to get bike lanes, we are proposing to reduce the cross-section from 4 lanes with parking to a 3-lane cross-section with bike lane and parking. There'd be 1 lane each way and a center turn lane. The traffic counts on Van Buren, the ADT, the average daily traffic, is actually under 3,000 cars per day. A similar street near there is Hancock, and it's got actually more like 5,000 cars per day, and it was built as a 2-lane with parking. It's a neighborhood street, and it operates fine. So we feel that Van Buren will operate sufficiently because of the low ADT. Temple and Gap, which is adjacent to this project, was a 4-lane street, and it was reduced to a 3-lane cross-section back a few years ago, and it's been operating fine, and its ADT was back in 2007 was 13,000 cars. It's probably a little higher now, and it's operating fine. So we don't think that the reduced laneage on Van Buren is going to be an issue for motorists. This is the Hancock existing that we're referring to. The other part of the project is making the walk route accessible. There's a lot of missing ramps. There's these alley and driveway crossings which are not accessible, so all those will be brought up to ADA standards. There's been a lot of public involvement, the meetings with the school and the administration. There's been 2 public meetings, and the HOAs have been brought in, and for the most part it's been positive. I think people like the project, and they're not concerned with the reduced laneage. We've had open houses that people were invited to, and again, the feedback has been good. Again, some of the notices, District 11, ATAC, by Colorado Springs have all been involved. So I present this material because one of the things is if we are proposing a lane reduction, we are supposed to bring it to the CAC and board as an informational item and let you know what we're doing and why we think that the project is a viable option. So we are looking at starting this probably in July. You got about 4 months of work on the concrete, and then there'll be about a month of fog sealing and restriping the road to stripe it to the proposed cross-section. Is there any questions on the project?
Mr. Gonzalez.
So I was looking through this, is Van Buren a PPRTA road
There is no PPRTA roads per se.
for Van Buren?
This is being funded through, there's some city bike tax money, the grant, and we are asking for money to be transferred into the pedestrian transportation program, which is an RTA A-list program. It's basically what we call our missing sidewalk program.
Okay,
And so that's how we're funding the
Right,
RTA
so
portion.
Van Buren is not a PPRTA project? It's the pedestrian.
Yeah, the pedestrian is yeah, and then we fund sidewalk, missing sidewalk
I got it.
segments all through the city.
And
through
so
that
my
program.
concern is, when we're talking about in 2 or 4 years or 3 years, going to PPRTA 3 proposal, we need to maintain credibility. And so Van Buren is not a PPRTA project road. Now, the pedestrian is, but you're not asking only for pedestrian changes, you're asking for road changes, which is the road dieting. So that's
And-
where I have some questions. So my other question, and then I'll let others chime in, is can the city of Colorado Springs road or general fund not pay for this matching grant part? It's $200,000.
We did, we had a little city matching money, and the original, I think 60,000 of it was RTA match money. The city bike tax fund is putting about 40,000 into this project, and that'll actually cover the cost of the fog seal and the striping.
Okay.
So technically, RTA is not paying for the change in the cross-section.
But
we're using this, I'm asking for this additional money basically for this
right, and
concrete.
so my question is, can city general fund not pay for this?
No,
Why not?
we don't have the funds.
Okay, so they
It's-
can, okay, let me
it's-
clarify.
it's, you know,
They
there's
can
no.
fund it if they want to fund it.
No, the budget is set. What we have available for capital has been allocated to some other large projects, and they're committed. And we only have what we get in public works, and the city has a lot of other obligations, public safety, and so there isn't available funding to cover the shortfall.
Mr. Williams.
So this then becomes the first consequence of my statement earlier. When this ballot issue was placed in front of the people, we said priority A projects being completely funded prior to use of funding on priority B projects. That's what we promised. My concern, when I look at the pedestrian list, is that it is already 800,000 over the funding. You're proposing to exacerbate this, which takes further money away ultimately from Category B projects.
Well-
And the original idea, if you look at the size and scope of the Priority B, is that we would get a significant, or at least a reasonable number of those done, having been part of that process when we put those on the ballot. And I'm concerned about the ballooning of projects that are funded complete, according to the promise that was made, that ultimately takes away funding from Category B. I understand that, because what you're suggesting is that we will backfill later where we're transferring the money from. Your anticipation that we're going to send money back into Academy to backfill this, right? You're not saying Academy's cheaper than...
Yeah, no, we will backfill.
Yeah. So essentially, we're backfilling it from a Category B project to fund an additional project that is already completely funded. And that's my concern with this proposal. But it sounds like the chair wants to respond to me. so I'm
I
happy
will
to engage
respond
in
when
the
it's
dialogue.
time for me to respond. I want to hear if anybody else has any comments.
What I would say about the pedestrian program is that we have quite a need for accessibility throughout the city, and this program has been very useful in meeting those. We have a lot of people who request and need access, and this being Van Buren being near two schools, or 4 schools total, is a very good target area to make the area accessible. And yes, we have been using the pedestrian transportation program to meet those needs. There are other needs besides just roadway, and and there's a lot of competing needs. And what we're trying to do is just balance everything out, make sure we get the A list done, which we project we can do that. And also use some funding to do the pedestrian and roadway safety. The reason those projects were put on the ballot is because we could not foresee every need, and so we couldn't list 300 projects. So we wanted a program fund where, as needs came up, we could have money to take care of those, and that's why those programs have been utilized.
Right, but Mike, we said this program fund was going to be about $5 million. It's already about $6 million. You're proposing to increase this program fund even more.
I think those project costs were spread out based on a target that the city was going to have $200 million, and we had to kind of balance that out. I don't know if I never thought of the intent was, these budgets cannot be exceeded. Otherwise, we wouldn't be finishing West Colorado. We wouldn't be finishing Pikes Peak, or doing some of these program projects.
But those were specific projects that we said we would complete. This was a general area. And my concern is, to the extent we take money away from the specific projects listed in Category B to continue to expand, I guess, where is the limit that you anticipate on this particular scope overrun? How much are you anticipating anything more being done in the pedestrian?
Oh, yes.
I would hope so. I would hope so.
But the problem with that is we said this was a $5 million project, not a $20 million project.
And Mr. Williams, I would say that we said many of these A-list projects were based on estimates back then, and we made a commitment to get those done. The city is getting those done, but I would bet at a premium to what they were estimated at 10 years ago, that things have gone up, expenses have gone up, and the A-list has been accomplished by doing those things. Part of the voters' intent in approving the PPRTA also was to give the discretion to the city to address pedestrian access issues and pedestrian safety issues. I am not so tied to a list that where, from my perspective, this is a safety issue, and it's not only a safety issue, it's a safety issue for students accessing schools that the citizens would prefer, I'll get to you in a second, the citizens would prefer to address those safety issues rather than say we're going to complete this project and the kids can just handle this all themselves. So I understand where you're coming from. I tend to disagree with the priority of it, and I know Mr. Lohino's, Mr. Gonzalez.
Thank you. And so I would say I absolutely agree with your comments, and if those are your beliefs and the beliefs of the City Council, then you can approve that increase in the Colorado Springs General Fund. You have the authority to do that. This is a project that is not an original or a PPRTA project. They're adding it through pedestrian, and I'll note that we're being requested for pedestrian funding. You mentioned safety. There's a safety fund here that's not being utilized. There's a very specific on-street bikeway improvements Phase 1 fund in PPRTA, and that's not being utilized. We're using pedestrian. My guess is because the rest of the grant fits with the pedestrian upgrades, and the city is at the same time taking advantage of that upgrades to then do the road dieting, and so they don't want to ask from two different funds. But there's a very specific bike improvement fund. There's a very specific safety fund. You're not requesting that from those funds. You're requesting it from pedestrian funds, and this is a street that's not on PPRTA.
And Mr. Scorman first, and then Ms. Williams, yes.
Well, is the microphone on? There we go. Yeah. As one of the people that was involved with the original PPRTA, I know we want to be very specific about projects that we've promised and completed. I agree. I think that's a good opportunity to tell the voters that we accomplished something. We've done the same thing with TOPS. However, I'm reluctant to do so much predicting of what the voters want and be so specific about certain pots of money here and certain pots of money there when we really don't know what they want. And in fact, when I look at polling lately, and this has been in the last 5 years, there is a tremendous interest in safety for schools and kids. And so I know we don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater here. We don't want to say that we want to lose the opportunity to renew this. We want to make sure our promises are good. But do we throw out every project because it wasn't in the A list or it's not in the B list now? And this is something that you're talking about for schools. A lot of people, a lot of voters. And I just want to make sure we're not, coming to too quick of a judgment on these things to really understand why we're doing it. If we can complete the A list and we can get to some of the B projects, I think we would be able to have that promise with the voters anyhow. So I'm just going to throw that in there.
Ms. Williams.
Yeah, Mike, if you could please go back to the vehicles per day table.
Okay.
Average trips to my concern is it is for the same reasons that Mr. Gonzalez pointed out, but also I would prefer to see us spend our money on bigger projects that are more visible prior to going, so that we can prepare to go out onto the ballot. And I don't think that it's necessary, it's not the change in categories that I'd like to see. I am reluctant to continue to spend more on these general categories as opposed to the specific ones.
Okay.
Yes.
What I would say to that is basically we will bring any budget, mid-year and beginning every new year, city staff will bring a proposed budget, and it's your ultimate approval that'll guide that.
Mr. Stevens.
Given the conversation that's taken place today about going on to the B list and the constraints in the future approvability, I think it is an important conversation for this board to have is what will satisfy these general bucket funds, and also I think it's important to, when voting on this, consider what's on the B list, because I imagine that there's public safety issues there, and there may be similar bucket list things, phase 2 of these similar programs on the B list. And given that we've spent almost 100% more than we had budgeted in those bucket categories, it's hard for me to not say that we've fully satisfied that, if not more, given that we're only 33% more than we've originally budgeted on the overall list. So we've overemphasized these larger bucket categories, and I don't see a definitive end to that would shift us into the B category. And that's a concern, and I understand the importance of that, but I also don't have the advantage of seeing what we're giving up and what we're not funding on the B list that would come up next if we stop funding these bucket categories in the A list.
Any other questions? I have some to say. I want to go back to the prior presentation. As I look at this, you're anticipating 93% completion of the A-list items, and if I'm reading this correctly, I may not be, with an expenditure of just under $10 million in 2023. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. And so the numbers continue roughly the same. That leaves an additional $61 million, give or take, from 2023 and 2024 to address B-list items, other external items, and things along those lines. that are identified by the city as the priorities that are within the PPRTA jurisdiction. Is that correct?
Theoretically, if
Roughly,
things,
if the- you know, I mean,
if things hold out, we would have.
And I think we can be so concerned. First of all, kudos to you. Kudos to the city for completing darn near 100% of the A-list and having at least an anticipated budget of about $70 million of excess A-list money at the end of 2023, 2024 to address additional issues on the B-list and within the discretion of these other sorts of pools. We can become so concerned as a board with creating an image to try to get reapproval, that is not doing what is appropriate and an appropriate expenditure for the city. That's why I think these small items, if they're identified by the staff as most significant, most important for public safety, whether or not they're visible for PPRTA purposes, PPRTA 3 purposes, that's an appropriate use of tax funds. And we can become so concerned with intruding, if you would, on the staff of the county, the staff of the cities, and the staff of the jurisdictions, that they are not going to feel comfortable doing what they think is important within the jurisdiction that they have with this. That I think we need to not be so focused on the political reality of trying to do and enact a PPRTA 3 that we don't allow our staff to use PPRTA funds appropriately between now and then. Mr. Williams.
So let me talk about that and explain a much broader view than our chair is characterizing it as. Category B includes specific projects such as school and neighborhood pedestrian improvements, Phase 2, Colorado Springs. So it contemplates that there are additional needs beyond Phase 1. Category B includes, where was it? Pedestrian transportation improvements, Phase 2. So there was certainly a recognition that there was a certain amount that were in Phase 1, and there'd be others that would be needed in Priority B. And so it's not simply a political question. It is also a matter of the integrity of this board and of the entire Pikes Peak RTA project when we say we're going to do this and then we're going to rank the Category B projects. Do I think that some of these pedestrian improvements, some of these, particularly the school-related ones, are important and should be ranked high in what we do in B? Yes. But the promise was we would do all the A stuff first and then do B. Not that we'd pick a few things like school and pedestrian and then, well, we'll count that in Phase 1 instead of Phase 2. And so there has to be some limit if this board has integrity with what we have promised we would do. And that's my concern. Having put my political capital on the line as a representative from the most conservative commissioner district when I made the motion to put the RTA on the ballot, I am very committed to doing what we promised to do. And my concern with a continual drain into the unspecified projects without a limit is that we undercut that integrity. And I'm not prepared to do that. And it's not just a political issue. This is my personal integrity. I'm not saying yours, I'm saying mine. And others have different definitions of where they are. But we made promises, and we put things in priorities when we created the first RTA, when we created the second RTA. And, you know, to Richard's point of should you have this priority or should you have more flexibility, excellent question, but we made a decision to go a particular direction with the RTA. That's different than the city did with 2C, where we said, trust us, we're going to use this for good stuff. It's going to be in this general category. My concern in this case is we didn't go that route. We said, these are projects we're going to do, and some of these are critical safety projects that are in Category B. When you look at Powers Boulevard and other issues where people literally die and have died. And so it's not that I don't think safety is important. I think it's one of the critical projects. As you might recall, our saving time and saving lives, I think, were the two things that were on those Pikes Peak RTA 1 signs. So it is part of it. But it's also not an unlimited pot. And maybe this isn't the place to draw the limit, but I'm trying to figure out where that limit is, because I'm not prepared to say, if Mike says the city is interested in continuing at the same rate of $6 million every 5 years, of doing 230% of the original promise here, because then that means those other Category B projects aren't being done. And so that's what I'm wrestling with on this particular thing. I raised the issue a month ago with transfers to the vague categories. Now that I see the vague categories, and to Commissioner Lahinas's point of, well, why didn't you use one of the other categories? I think he cited on-site street bikeway improvements phase 1. That's over as well. Every one of the general categories has been equaled, and every one of them has been exceeded, although a couple not by much. So, and yet there's ones that are significantly below what was promised in the budget, and we've got this whole category of B. And if you look at the list, there's a couple on A, but the B projects are almost as long as the A. So saying, well, we'll have a year of the B projects isn't what was promised. And so that's what I'm wrestling with here. I think it's a wonderful project. I think there are certainly projects that could be done with it. I'm not sure if it fits the definition of a Category A project anymore, since we've run through the money that we said we'd spend in the category.
Mr. Scorman?
Well, I mean, again, I just think we're second guessing. What if I said this was very popular with hundreds or maybe thousands of students and their parents, and that these are people that would very much like to support the renewal of PPRTA because we did this project? We just don't know. And again, I think if we can, referring to what Tyler was talking about, if we, or David, if we knew what we were going to substitute it for, not just the Category B and the Category A and the projects that we promised way back when, because the city has changed significantly since then, and I think we want to do what we think is the best for the citizens, and that's what they're going to reapprove this for. Not whether we did A or B or we completed more B than we thought we could because we eliminated some projects that were about safety and kids. And I know we may need more information, but I just think we're second guessing what we think is going to make this come back and be passed again, and I'm not sure we know. I really don't. I just think we're guessing. So if that's the case, let's take everything off the list unless it's a Category A or B. Let's never look at the merits. Let's not look at the safety. Let's not see if there's a lot of public support we can gain from the project. Let's just go to A and B, and we don't need to bother with any other decisions here. And so that's what I worry about. I think we're getting too formulaic and not thinking about the projects themselves.
Ms. Williams?
I think I'm going to be unwilling in the future to support any of these projects. One of the things that I'm struggling with today is it doesn't necessarily matter if I'm around in 2022 or 2024 and a board member of the county commissioners to support the PPRTA, I would be unwilling to vote to put it on the ballot if we continue down this road. And so that would be my concern. It doesn't matter what polling we do outside of this room. If you poll 5 county commissioners, would you be able to get 3 of them to continue this form of spending?
Any other comments? Back to the board. Mr. Williams, you asked, where do you draw the line? This is a political process. This is a political board. Frankly, one of the things since I've been on the chair is I have been encouraging this kind of debate, not only here, but with the Citizens Advisory Committee as well. I am the City Council liaison to the Citizens Transportation Advisory Board, and I encourage that same kind of debate there. Where do you draw the line in democracy is in a muddy, messy, dirty area where you struggle back and forth. And this is the kind of back and forth that we need. It's going to be much less pronounced, I think, than what we are about to hear a little while from now. But I do think that this is what we need to do. And from my perspective, regardless of which pot they specifically put this under, this is school safety. This is pedestrian safety. This does meet the areas, and yes, they are discretionary funds. They are the vague areas. As a practical matter, and Mr. Chavez, Ms. Irvin can comment on this. Do we have enough money? Do we have enough? Assuming we had enough money, are there resources to employ people right now to complete all the A and all the B items out there in terms of contractors, material suppliers, equipment suppliers, things like that?
I think the restraining factors really is the budget, the cash flow.
Mm-hmm.
I think if we put out more work, people will come. If there's enough work, you'll get more people. But prices are being affected by it. But I think, again, it's what we have year to year is really what drives how much we can get done.
And this is a project that can get done in this year that has a defined benefit that you've talked about for safety and pedestrian access.
Yes.
Okay. Any other comments? Can I get a motion either to approve or disapprove item 9C? Anybody want to make a motion?
Well, I would move approval.
Okay. Do I have a second on the motion for approval?
Nope.
I'll second the motion.
Second the motion. It has been moved and approved. I think we probably ought to do a voice vote because of the disagreement. Mr. Squirman.
Yes.
Mr. Williams.
Pass, since you got to do that one.
Wait, one time. For you, but I didn't get to go. All right, Ms. Williams.
No.
Mr. Duray.
Yes.
Mr. Stevens.
No.
Mr. Gonzalez.
No.
I have chair votes yes. Mr. Carpenter.
There we go. I'll vote no.
And then Mr. Williams.
What's the current vote?
It's going to fail whether you vote yes.
No, it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6.
Because of 4-4, yeah.
That's 4 no's and 3 yeses.
Yes.
I'm going to vote no. I'm not saying we can't revisit it, but, and here's my explanation. I want to revisit this in terms of I think we need to say, these are some limits as to how far we're willing to go.
Okay.
And so that's why I voted no on this. Not that I will, but I want to have that larger discussion, and maybe it's setting a policy, or maybe it's setting a dollar cap to say, if it's double the amount or whatever that amount may be, to say, okay, we'll go up to this amount. City, prioritize up to that amount, but I'm not ready to say that's where we are yet.
Okay, we are going to pass 9D, sorry. Well, that failed. The motion failed. And then Mr. Chavez, 9E is the City of Colorado Springs contracts. I think those have been presented in the packet and are generally, do you have anything that you need to say other than they're in the packet and that they were approved by the CAC?
Yeah, if there's any questions on those?
Move approval.
Can I have a motion on 9E?
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? 9E carries. 9F, Ms. Irvin.
Thank you very much.
Okay.
Jennifer Irvin, County Engineer, in the same fashion. We have 4 items for your consideration today. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Any questions for Ms. Irvin? May I have a motion on item 9F?
Motion to approve.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That carries.
Thank you for your consideration.
All right, 10A, City of Colorado Springs Transit Services Monthly Report. Okay. Do we want to take a break? I'm getting some people leaving. All right, go ahead. That's not on the record. Yes, sir.
Good afternoon. Brian Vitulli with the City of Colorado Springs, Mountain Metro Transit with your monthly transit report. For our fixed route service, we provided nearly 280,000 trips in April of this year, and that was an increase of almost 16.4% over April of 2018. For our ADA paratransit service, we showed an increase of 7.7%, and for our van pool services, we operated 25 van pools in April of this year, and that was up 11.3% over April of last year. Project update. We're very close to releasing our fall service change proposal, and you actually saw some of this in your packet earlier with the budget amendment. But what we're proposing to do with the additional RTA revenues is to add 2 sets of off-peak service. So we're looking to add Saturday evening service on all of the routes that we currently operate weekday service on. So that's 13 routes that we operate weekday evening service on. We're looking to add that to Saturday. What we've been hearing from the community, our riders, is we need more off-peak services to access jobs. A lot of the jobs that our riders are employed by are not Monday through Friday, 9 to 5 jobs. A lot of them are weekday evenings, Saturdays and Sundays. So this will help them greatly. The second item of our off-peak improvements is to increase frequency on Sunday on our 5 highest ridership routes. So that's routes 1, 3, 5, 25, and 27. 25 and 27 operate on North and South Academy, very, very strong ridership routes. Route 3 goes from downtown terminal to Manitou Springs. Route 1 goes through the Hillside neighborhood to Academy and Hancock. And Route 5 is by far our strongest ridership route, and that's high-frequency service that operates from our downtown terminal to the Citadel Mall along Boulder and Platte. So currently, those 5 routes have 30-minute frequency on Saturdays, but they operate every 60 minutes on Sunday, and we're proposing to increase that to 30 minutes on Sunday. The second part of our proposed fall service changes was to make some fare adjustments. We recently completed a fare study in early 18. Took most of 2017 and early 18 to conduct that. A lot of really good recommendations came out of that, some that we implemented last year. And we were looking to have the public process, along with our route changes, to make some of these fare structure changes. We're rethinking that. We're thinking we're going to push that back to a January public process, January 2020, and implement in June or July of 2020 for a couple reasons. There's a Title VI analysis that we need to do for every route change, and that looks at how those changes affect our customers. Does it put a unfair burden on them? Or does it put more improvements in one area of our region than others? So it's kind of an equity analysis. And the fare changes that we're proposing, just in general, fare changes are a little bit difficult, and it requires a lot of data that we don't quite have right now. So we need to do some customer surveys, and we need to do that quickly. So we're going to push that back a couple months. The second part of that is we want to give our customers as much notice as we can, because this will, it's a balanced approach. There are some fare increases, but there are some incentives to use passes, and some of the passes are proposed to go down in cost. So it's kind of a balanced approach, but it will no doubt have some effect on our riders, so we want to give them time to adjust their budgets as necessary. So the second section of our fall service change proposal regarding the fare adjustments will be taken off of our proposal. This was just as of yesterday we decided this. And I just wanted to give a very brief update. Councilmember Geislinger, I believe you had some comments last month asking us to look at national ridership trends and how we kind of fit in with all of that. So 2018, nationally, we saw ridership decrease. From 2017, it dipped about 2%, and that was a level that was not seen since 2006. And all of this is following a banner ridership year in 2014. 2015 started to see a slip in ridership nationally among systems throughout the country. A lot of the decreases we're seeing on systems that you think are model systems. So, New York, Chicago, LA, San Francisco, Philadelphia, Washington, D.C. all saw ridership decreases. And we've been saying this with our monthly reports here over the past year, because we saw some decreases last year. You can't pin it on one factor. We are competing with the private automobile. So in a lot of these cases, it seems that 2018 was also a banner year for miles traveled. So there's a little bit of a correlation there, but there's private auto ownership, low insurance costs, fuel still relatively cheap. What we saw locally here is 2018 with our 2C construction, there are a lot of roads that are torn up and a lot of detours required for us. Pikes Peak Avenue has been unusable for much of last year and a little bit of this year. And that we have Route 7 that operates on that, and that's a pretty high ridership route. So we saw impacts there. The Pikes Peak Cog Railroad was not operating last year, and the Manitou Spring services that we operate for Manitou, those are heavy performers, really strong performers. And we saw a hit on ridership for some of those services. So even though we ended up slightly low last year, I believe it was about 3%, we still kind of finished strongly. And right now we are up 3.6% over the first four months of this year over last year. So we're trending good. There are a lot of systems nationwide that have undergone route restructurings to address decreasing ridership. Some of the systems, like Baltimore, have not changed their system in over 2 decades. Houston, Austin, Texas, they went through major route restructuring studies and implementation to try to address the ridership decreases. And a lot of this is shifting demographics, population change, and just having services that are not frequent, going to different hours of the day and on the weekends, and really just not being as convenient when you compete against the private automobile. So I hope that helps provide a little more context.
Mr. Williams.
Brian, nationally, has there been any correlation study between a strong economy and where a weaker economy gets more bus ridership as people don't have the private resources to pursue alternative methods?
That's a great question. This is not new. I mean, the sliding ridership over the past several years is kind of new and somewhat alarming, but you're right. When the economy is strong, ridership tends to take a dip. When the ridership is not so strong, when the economy is not so strong, ridership increases. So that could be another factor. We're just in a really strong economy and have been for many years, and people are finding alternatives to transit with some of those other factors that I mentioned. So, it's what we're looking at. 2008 was the last year. We were at about 3.5 million trips for 2008. That's when we had services going out to Falcon, to Peterson Air Force Base, Fountain, Fort Carson. The Front Range Express, Frex, was operating, which was a huge ridership generator. Then the Great Recession hit, and our ridership dipped into 2.5, 2.6 million rides for several years. And then 2015, as we started to rise from the ashes and rebuild our system, we hit that 3 million rider or trip threshold. And we've been at that all through last year, even though we had a slight decrease last year. But we're on target to hopefully keep things going. And with a lot of these route improvements, we hope to continue to trend upward.
Any other questions for Mr. Vituli? I'm not sure if you were in. I thought I saw you come in at the very beginning during citizen comment.
Yes.
We did ask, I know from City Council's perspective, we've asked for a presentation from Mountain Metro on, at some point, the provision of services for disabled adults and for the aged community. If you could echo and bring that here as well, we'd like to have that.
Okay. Thank you. Sure. And I know we will be addressing City Council in 2 weeks regarding our downtown transit center.
Okay.
So we can look to add that.
And you guys okay with me taking a question from the, go ahead, what's your question?
My question.
And I'm not sure he's going to be able to address it now, and if you can't address it now, I'm not going to put any pressure on you to address it.
I'm really sorry I missed those comments earlier.
But I know Mr. Easton was here, so Mr. Easton can talk to you about that.
So Jolene Hausman, Fountain Valley Senior Center. My question is, in the Mountain Metro report, it talks about fixed transit and ADA paratransit. Is it possible to start including the specialized transit because it is directly funded through the PPRTA?
It is. It's actually included in our
Yeah, and there's been nothing noted in MMT reports of specialized transportation to the PPRTA board. I went through all the reports.
Okay. Can you include that, Mr. Vituli? Sure. Okay. Anything else from Mr. Vituli? Yes, Mr. Williams.
Just to follow up on one of the other questions that was asked. As being newer, at some point, it doesn't have to be in public meeting, but actually there may be some interest in it. What is the mix of for-profit, nonprofit, and public providers in terms of what we use? So I know at times there's been some contracting out to other companies that are for-profit at time, and so that was one of the other issues that was raised. And so just kind of getting, these are public employees, these we contract, I think it was Laidlaw was one of the providers at one point, and these are nonprofits. Thanks.
Okay, sure.
Yes, go ahead. Please make it
Briefly.
quick. Yes, brief.
Gail Nels, Envita. My understanding about transit ridership nationwide is that although the fixed route are going down, the need is increasing in specialized transit around the country, and that is reflected here in the town.
Thank you. All right, thank you, Mr. Vituli. I'm going to just suggest, Ms. Irvin, yes, come on up. Let's go through 10B and get through everything, and we'll take a break before we get back to 9D.
Jennifer Irvin, El Paso County County Engineer, and I apologize for some of you, because some of you heard this presentation from CDOT this morning, but some of you have not. So I wanted to make sure we, and I'll try and go quickly. It's a lot of information. But today I'm here to brief you on the proposed build grant that El Paso County and CDOT and many other partners in the region are partnering on. But just want to start out by saying what I'm asking today is several things. So we are partnering on a proposed military mobility and safety improvement project located on essentially four corridors: I-25, State Highway 94, Charter Oak Ranch Road, and South Academy. So today we are asking you for several things. I'm asking that you provide a letter of commitment in support of the project for financial letter of commitment for the PPRTA portion that I'm going to talk about. Also, a letter of support for the project saying that the PPRTA board supports the project. And then also I'm asking to increase the total project budget for the South Academy project. So just a little bit of background. In late April, the U.S. DOT announced a notice of funding opportunity for the Build Discretionary Grant Program, and that is essentially the new Tiger Grant Program. Applications are due mid-July, July 15th, 2019. The Build program is going to allocate $900 million to surface transportation infrastructure projects across the country, and the maximum Build grant award is $25 million. No more than $90 million can be awarded to a single state with a 50% match. So CDOT is making 3 applications, and they've asked us to partner with one of those. And the theme is really military support, mobility, and safety improvement in the Pikes Peak or Colorado Springs area. Just a little bit of background on the proposed scope. There are 4 corridors that I talked about. The first is the I-25 corridor, and the safety improvements that CDOT is looking at for there include median barrier, bridge rehabilitation on several bridges, widened shoulders. They're going to replace their failing asphalt with concrete pavement for an 8-mile stretch, and then also replace the 2 bridges over South Academy on I-25. The other project that we are including, and just if you want to, there's a map at the end. The other project at the south terminus of those improvements on I-25 is Charter Oak Ranch Road. Charter Oak Ranch Road is access into Gate 19 for Fort Carson, and that is something that we, the county, received a Tiger planning grant about 2012 for. So that project is actually shovel-ready. We have received, we have completed all of the design, all of the right-of-way acquisition. We have one that is in process to be completed right now, and we have all of our environmental clearances. But at this time, we have a $5 million delta on that project and don't have adequate funding for the construction phase. On that project, we also have some federal and road and bridge match for construction that we have already garnered through PPACG. The next corridor is the one I think that is applicable to PPRTA, and that's our South Academy Boulevard project. That is already a project that is on the A list. And the project was to widen South Academy Boulevard from 4 to 6 lanes. This is in compliance with the South Academy accessibility study that was completed by the city and county in 2004. And this serves as a critical access between the haul route from Fort Carson to Peterson Air Force Base, but also provides some great capacity improvements for the Colorado Springs Airport, and then makes sense to do that in conjunction with the I-25 bridge replacements. The final project is a project that many of you are aware about is some improvements to State Highway 94. These improvements are not capacity improvements. Basically, that road is a 2-lane road. It's not to make it 4-lane, but essentially it's safety improvements, including passing lanes, signage improvements, and intersection enhancements, and will help with safety and congestion on that corridor. So the project total is about $130 million million, and the grant application is still in process of being prepared. But essentially, from a PPRTA standpoint, and I put together some bullets for you, I think what's important about this project and why PPRTA should partner with CDOT and El Paso County on this is that we're able to accelerate this project, the South Academy portion of the project, for the safety and welfare of our citizens. We are going to be able to show continued support for our local military installations, which I think Fort Carson is the second largest employer in the state of Colorado, so that's a good thing, especially as we are under considerations for the U.S. Space Command. The good news about this is that CDOT is the primary applicant, and they will be responsible for all of the reporting and administration of this, and so that will save county staff time and money on this project, and also the PPRTA. We are able to secure funding for the shovel-ready project, and that's Charter Oak Ranch Road. Not really a concern of this board specifically, because that's not funded by this board, but I think for a regional standpoint, it's a great thing. We have, as a backup for the Charter Oak Ranch Road project, applied for a federal land access program, and with that, we would have to provide additional match. So that's a savings that the county could use to other projects. I think we will realize a cost savings on the overall project by coordinating with CDOT, by doing the environmental clearance on both the I-25 project and the South Academy project together, and also making sure that if that is advertised as a $130 million project, we'll receive much better prices than we would for separate projects of a smaller amount. We will be working with CDOT to do an innovative construction management general contracting approach, which helps accelerate the project to construction, and that is a similar approach used on the I-25 GAP project, and I think we've shown that that is a good way to make sure that we accelerate these projects along. And then finally, CDOT will provide staff for the overall construction oversight during construction of these projects, and that will enable us to focus on other important projects, not only from a county standpoint, but also from a PPRTA standpoint. So we presented this at the June 5th PPRTA CAC meeting and received a positive recommendation. And this morning, CDOT presented it at PPACG and received approval for a letter of support. CDOT will formally review and approve the grant application at their June 20th meeting and give their head nod for submittal. And I anticipate taking this to our Board of County Commissioners in late July to receive approval as per our policies to go ahead and work with CDOT to submit the grant and receive letter support directly from the Board of County Commissioners as well. In regards to the $18 million budget, we have not spent any funds for this project at this point. When we looked at this project, we had identified some concern about the cost and $18 million for the need. The county staff a couple years ago went through PPACG to get additional funds for the project. So not only do we have $18 million currently identified for the project budget, we also have a $5 million federal grant through PPACG to supplement the project with a $1 million road and bridge, county road and bridge match. I am asking to increase the project budget from $18 million for another $2.5 million. We want to show as much support for this project. The $18 million was estimated for an overall project budget in 2012. As we know, we're seeing some project overall increases. So with the application, we have to show a commitment for what we're going to be spending for construction. So what I'd like to do is commit that entire $18 million for construction and then ask for a budget increase, and we would be using that for design phase for the project. I would say that as we estimated our overall project budgets for all of these projects, we did it at, we took the overall project program budgets for the city and the county, and then back that off 25%. So we assumed a 75% allocation. And so this is about 12% over the original budget.
Any questions for Ms. Irvin? Ms. Ivy?
Just a question about the letter of financial commitment that you'd be requesting. Would that be for the $18 million that would be budgeted in 2019?
Correct, and we would probably budget that over a couple of years, but that letter of commitment is for $18 million. We would not put in the design phase because we are starting that design phase immediately, and so that design phase would not be included in the letter of commitment for the project.
Okay. My concern just for the board is that we can't commit future funds, obviously. We can give a letter of financial commitment that we will consider $18 million. X number has already been allocated for this year, budgeted and appropriated for this year, and directing that X number of dollars be included for consideration in the 2020, 21, whatever future year budgets, but just being mindful of that.
And what I would ask in regards to that, because we don't have that letter today, is to be able to work with PPRTA staff and at the discretion, you, in regards to that. That was a similar tactic done for the infra grant by Douglas County. Per statute, you can't commit future dollars, but we do know that we have a reasonable expectation of that occurring. So what I'd like to do is specifically ask for that letter of commitment for the $18 million, and then work with staff to make sure that that's something that the chair can sign.
Mr. Williams.
So as I look through the original allocation and then what the planned budgets are, I know that some of the projects, Pikes Peak and Colorado come to mind, have been significantly over the estimates. This is the first time you've sought an increase in this particular budget line. Do you anticipate that will be sufficient, or are there other issues we should be aware of in the future?
So I typically, I'm gonna kind of go back and not answer the question directly, but I'm going to get there. So if you look at the county's budget and what we have shown, if you look at Beverly's rainbow spreadsheet, we typically don't ask for, the county, has been my practice not to ask for a budget increase until I really need to, until I know that we have a certain amount. And usually that's just prior to construction. We try to make sure that we're within those project budgets as closely as possible. This project has not been designed, and so it's kind of unique in me coming in advance of doing the design work and having a better idea. We have looked at the project. We do feel that, based upon some discussions, that $23 million and plus $2.5 million for design phase is a whole lot of money, and this project, we feel like we can bring it in within that. I will never say in advance of not designing a project that I won't have to come back for more. But what I would say overall is that we've been very thoughtful about coming back to the board for additional monies. West Colorado Avenue is what I would is the exception, not the rule. And if you look at all of our project budgets, I think at this point the only ones we've come to and asked for additional funds at this point from the county standpoint is West Colorado Avenue and Monument Hill Road. Now, I can't say that that would never happen, but I feel pretty confident that we're very close. And I guess the other thing is that I think part of why we're recommending this partnership is so that we can make sure that we do everything we can to stay within that project budget. And I think in advertising a $130 million project versus a $25 million project, we are going to get significantly better prices for this project.
I'd move approval of the item.
Does anybody else have any questions before we get to that point? Any questions, concerns? Okay. It's been moved and seconded that 10C or 10B be approved. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, that carries. 10C, Mr. Chavez. Colorado Springs monthly change order and property acquisition report.
Is there a way to?
I'm just going to say that
I have to leave pretty soon, and I didn't know if we could take something out of order, the pedestrian bridge. Is it possible, or?
Let's go. Everybody has seen. Does anybody want Mr. Chavez to make a presentation?
There's a question on the change order.
On the change orders.
Okay.
All right. Thank you. 10D, Ms. Irvin, same thing. You can come on up. Has everybody has seen Ms. Irvin's change order reports? Any comments, concerns? Thank you, Ms. Irvin. Somebody from Green Mountain Falls. Is anybody from Green Mountain Falls here?
No, but representing them on behalf of their project.
All right. Any questions on Green Mountain Falls?
Thank you.
All right. Thank you. Quarterly reports from member governments. None.
Any questions?
None. All right. Administrative reports, the I-25 gap contribution funding plan, 11B.
So this is just our list of how we're going to get to
Right.
the point of paying CDOT their first installment.
I think that was in the packet. Any information on that? Okay. So now, if you want to go straight into it, do you want to take a 5-minute break, or do you want to go straight into 9D?
Is it okay? I just, sorry, I didn't realize this would go so long, and
I didn't think it was going to go that long either.
But I have a couple people that are waiting to meet me.
So let's go straight into 9D. And who's going to be the first presenter? And if you need to take a break, you can take a break with everybody else here.
You're loading the new. Okay.
Sorry.
All right, I'm going to go ahead and get started. I'm Ryan Phipps. I'm with the City of Colorado Springs, City Engineering. I'm the project manager for the Vermejo and Sierra Madre Streetscape and Reconstruction Project, as well as the Southwest Downtown Pedestrian Bridge. Previously, I came and spoke to you about some specifics about the design of those two projects. And today, the presentation more focuses on a bigger picture of what the revitalization of Southwest Downtown represents, and then how the city and the district are combining efforts in order to deliver a vision that has been established in many planning documents, and most recently in the Experience Downtown Master Plan. So this is the order of speakers today. Next up is going to be Jeff Finn, who represents the Southwest Downtown Business Improvement District. He'll be talking about Southwest Downtown, its vision, and its planning. I will get back up and talk specifically about the public participation in funding of the two specific projects. Mike Chavez will be available to address basically the status of PPRTA, where we're at. It may be a reiteration of what we talked about before, so that should be short. The regional impact will be brought to us by Bob Cope, representing economic development within the city and talking about the importance of the revitalization of Southwest downtown and the economic benefits that we can expect to see. And then Travis Easton, our City of Colorado Springs Public Works Director, will close us out. And we will try to be mindful of time, but there is a lot of information to go through here. Next up here will be Jeff Fenn.
Thank you, Chair and members of the board. My name is Jeff Finn. I come to you guys wearing two hats today. One is I am on the board of directors for the Southwest Downtown Business Improvement District. You'll hear me use the term BID, which is kind of the short acronym for that. And then I am also, when I switch my other hat, I wear the hat of being the project executive for the redevelopment of Southwest Downtown for Norwood Development Group. I think to understand kind of the magnitude and the groups that are working to kind of build this public-private partnership. This is a collage of the logos and the member organizations that are kind of working on the left side, really the design and implementation teams, and then on the right side, really the groups from supporters to funders. And we, as the Southwest Downtown BID, are significant funders. PPRTA has already been a funder in the improvements for, in particular, these two projects, the pedestrian bridge in Vermejo and Sierra Madre. Our role in particular from the bid is the funder of the enhancements, and I think you'll hear this term standard infrastructure and enhancements throughout the presentation today, and we'll get into that a little more later here. The vision really, though, and I'll try to go quickly because I know most of you guys have seen this presentation piece, is really been spearheaded by a group, Skidmore, Wings, and Merrill. Skidmore, Wings, and Merrill has done significant improvements in and around Denver, also have been the lead thinkers in the Air Force Academy since day one. They were the master planners and architects on the chapel, and then even through today. And I think SOM, as city builders from all over really the world, we asked them, meaning as the master developer, asked SOM to really think about what is the essence of this place, what is going to make this place, meaning Southwest Downtown, a thriving urban neighborhood. And so really the vision for Southwest comes into these kind of, I would say, 4 principles with one result. The first principle really is to build on the energy and the mission of the U.S. Olympic Museum and extend that mission into the neighborhood. Currently, there is no neighborhood in Southwest Downtown, and so the second piece is to create one that really focuses on health, wellness, and the connection to the outdoors and our wonderful trail system and park system. And through those connections, these public spaces that are going to be created will be memorable, vibrant, unique, and functional as well. And then make these connections to America the Beautiful Park and beyond, and then into downtown. They believe, and we believe also, that if we do this well, we will raise the pride coefficient. This is kind of, if you were to take a measurement, just kind of like PPRTA and government's poll for data, if you were to poll citizens for their pride in place and pride in city and pride in region, I think our goal would really be that this place in Southwest Downtown would raise the pride coefficient for residents across the region. And so this goal doesn't just end with streets and a bridge. It really, to create a place, it requires people and places for people to go. And so the places for people to go that we'll be creating really is anchored around 4,500 residential units, new offices, new retail and restaurant opportunities, and places also for people to stay, so new hospitality. It's an ambitious but achievable project in total that when you add up all of the square feet and the construction cost, as you know, construction just always costs way too much. The total is a $2 billion investment over the next 20 years, and we are already beginning that investment not only in the public realm with the Vermojo and Sierra Madre and bridge improvements, but also some of these buildings that you see here. The good news too is that we're not starting from scratch. I think the America the Beautiful Park, which was approved by voters in the late 90s as part of the SCIP, the Springs Community Investment Program funds. This was the anchor project for that initiative, and really was, to kind of keep this idea of standard infrastructure and enhancements. The park really was built with design and vision in mind. It was enhanced by groups, nonprofit groups like El Pomar with the Julie Penrose Fountain, and so it's a great park. But it is connected into the Pikes Peak Greenway to the west, but it is disconnected from downtown. Something I learned a little bit more about today previously from one of your votes was the improvements that PPRTA co-invested with, along with other sources, to improve the intersection of I-25 and Cimarron. And so this, while it is a fantastic piece of vehicular infrastructure, it also realigns some pretty critical trail connections on the Pikes Peak Greenway. The kind of at the heart of the district and its location at the terminus of Vermojo and Sierra Madre is the U.S. Olympic Museum Hall of Fame. I think most notable in it is the stories that it will tell. This is Jesse Owens, and when he almost single-handedly stood up to Hitler in 1936 and performed quite well for the U.S. And it's stories like this that are actually more about the history and culture and even less about sport. And then there's just the ridiculous winnings of. I wish I looked like that. But anyway, I don't. The gold medals and all the achievements of some of the most notable athletes, but then just also those that continue to strive to perform for our country and really be our representation on the national and international levels, and to inspiring future generations of athletes regardless of their abilities. And so that story, really of the human story, is going to be told inside the Olympic Museum, really around sports. It'll be told in a way that's interactive and that is accessible by all, even to where the building's designed, where everyone's taken up into the same elevator, and actually you come down at your own pace with gravity as your friend, not your foe. And so while most of us in this room will go to the Olympic Museum and Hall of Fame on a regular basis when we have out-of-town visitors and guests. Really, the way that the museum has been designed for kind of the locals is a piece of community infrastructure. And so there's a generous public plaza on the east side at the terminus of Vermojo and Sierra Madre, and then the way that this site actually lifts up and creates the east landing of the bridge that then connects and spans across the 240 feet of the railroad tracks. And so this image just kind of shows, and do I have a pointer? There's a laser. With the museum at its center, and then America the Beautiful Park and the Pikes Peak Greenway, really to the west, downtown, to the east, that these two connections that we're talking about today of Vermojo, Sierra Madre, and the pedestrian bridge are critical into creating really a phase one linkage and connection. This highlights the two locations, or the phase 1A infrastructure projects that are underway. And so with the bridge, this I thought would be a really helpful tool. I don't know how many of you guys use Strava. It's an application on your phone that tracks your trail runs and your bike runs and your walks and your hikes. And so this is actually the heat map of how current people are using the area. And you can see that's about as white hot as you get on the Pikes Peak Greenway. And so the Pikes Peak Greenway here is really, really well traveled. This actually is the hub. From this piece on the Midland Trail, you can connect into Red Rock open space. You can go above and go into Section 16. You can go beyond. From here, from this connection, you can get into Bear Creek Park and really connect into really all the way up. Kind of as you can keep going pretty far up if you have the endurance and the legs for it. To the north, obviously with the Pikes Peak Greenway connection here, and if you look here too, this intersection at Cascade in Colorado, it gets about 33,000 vehicles per day according to a 2009 count. And so in 2009, if you think about, has vehicular traffic increased? Probably. That's the earliest I could find, or the most recent I can find. But if you see here, creating this spine connection of both I'm going quick. Sorry. That connection really is important to make, to really then get visitors from the Greenway into downtown. And so this is kind of a diagram to show how the museum helps to do that. And really I'm going to try to speed up a little bit. The total cost of the bridge, you guys have seen a couple of these images before. The total cost of the bridge is $17.8 million. The cost to do a standard bridge is $5.5 million. It's a little different than what we knew going into this, but the enhancements that's being funded by both the BID funds, which are the Southwest Downtown BID funds, and City for Champions money, cover the $12.3 million. And then similarly, going from the museum on Vermojo and Sierra Madre, with the museum here, the plaza here, and then the intersection of Vermojo, Sierra Madre going east, I think this is going to be a fantastic street. It's going to be a street for people and cars. Those are not county employees coloring on the sidewalk. Those are new artists that are finding. If it was a city building, I'd say the same thing. But it is really going to be a place for people, which it currently is not. And even as you go east into the third block of Vermojo, which is the county's kind of the county's courthouse and sheriff's office block, you really get to see that this gets transformed, connecting park to park, connecting Pioneer Square to the America the Beautiful Park, and then the Pikes Peak Greenway. The total cost to reconstruct these 6 blocks, 100 and 140 feet of right-of-way width over this entire area, is $22.4 million. And so the 22, really using that same principle and methodology of what does a standard roadway and drainage cost to reconstruct, is this $12.4 million numbers. And then the Southwest Downtown Business Improvement District is going to fund $10 million of it. So in total, really the BID ends up being the funder, the major funder of both of these improvements. And then Brian will talk here kind of briefly about a consortium of funds that it really has taken to pull all of these together, including the funds that this board has approved. Thank you.
Can I just ask one question? So when we initially advertised this project on the ballot, we said it would be, what, a 3 million bridge or so? Because you had some numbers up.
I think Ryan's going to talk. I'll talk about that.
Thanks, Ryan.
All right, so that's the big picture vision. I'm going to drill down right now into the pedestrian bridge and the streetscaping work along Vermaho. So how do we define and divide responsibility between public and private? How does this partnership work? And so the way that it's been defined is the city side, the municipal side, local government is addressing standard infrastructure. These are things that we fund on all projects. There's nothing above and beyond standard infrastructure that we are scoping within our work. All of the enhancements, all the things that we're really excited about, the trees, the granite paving, the super cool design of the bridge, that enhancement is being funded through the bid or through the Regional Tourism Act infrastructure bonds, which have been dedicated to public improvements. So I want to go through and talk about this methodology and how it's been applied specifically to those two projects. So this is just the accumulation of these projects. In summary, you have the PED bridge, the streetscaping, the utility work, and then the other district infrastructure, which was on one of Jeff's slides that we didn't talk about specifically. But there's a number of other projects within this district. Really, it's a program to redevelop this area. It's not just the bridge project. It's not just the street project. There's a number of individual projects being wrapped in, being coordinated to make this happen. And then the list below is the sources of funding that we've identified for this project. You can see that whole list. I won't name them all off, but we have divided out the PPRTA bridge and street amounts that have previously been approved with respect to our current request. Our current request is to increase the PPRTA funding by $4.35 million between the bridge and the street work. So how do we come to these numbers? How do we substantiate what standard infrastructure cost? On the pedestrian bridge, several years ago, you were brought a cost estimate from Kathleen, and it was agreed upon at that point that $3.5 million would be the appropriate amount to be spent on this bridge project. That was purely a construction cost estimate. It was not a complete project cost estimate. If you were to add in, and these are on the low end of standard industry percentages, 10% for your design and engineering services, 5% for construction and administration, and 10% for your cost escalation for the last 4 years, which I'll take on any of our projects. And then the thing that's really specific to this location is railroad expenses. So coordinating with the railroads, we're crossing about a dozen lines there. It requires that we pay review fees. It requires that they have flaggers out there. We had to purchase an aerial easement, and then all of the coordination and construction to actually cross the tracks costs a significant amount of money. So if this were to be a standard city pedestrian bridge, the cost of the project would be approximately $5.5 million total project cost. The previous estimate that was provided was a construction cost estimate. So this is how we get to that $5.5 million number. The current PPRTA contribution to the pedestrian bridge represents about 63% of a standard pedestrian bridge at this location. We are requesting an additional $1.15 million to essentially cover the railroad expenses, which have, we've been in many coordination meetings with the railroads and have identified our contractor to identify what that cost is. That is the basis of our request. Still, the sum of our previous request plus this one at $4.65 million still is only 85% of what a standard city bridge would cost at this location, and we're honoring that limit on the city side. Go ahead.
Let me just ask a clever question. So you're not asking RTA to pay for all the cool enhancements you want to do.
No.
You're asking us simply to cover the escalation in the cost of the basic pedestrian bridge.
We're asking for an increased amount that is still below a pedestrian amount, yes. It's not for funding the enhancements. We're using the same methodology on the street.
If
Go
I
ahead.
might, Ryan, at the CAC, the bridge, are we done with the bridge
Yes.
component? At the CAC, the decision was made to bifurcate the bridge from the street improvements. When Mr. Gonzalez and I were talking during the pre-meeting, agenda idea, that there was the idea of bifurcating it as well and addressing the bridge first. Is that something that you guys are interested in doing? So if we're...
Are you voting now or just?
Well, I was going to say, is there anything else on the bridge that would be presented?
I think it would be important to finish the presentation before voting.
Okay.
So I'm going to move on to the street, and again, we're trying to move through this quickly. You should be familiar with this particular location. This is what we identify as Block 2 on Vermejo Avenue. That's the county's parking garage in the background and the administration building, Centennial Hall right there. This is a visual representation of what local government funding sources are going to pay for. This is not an image that you may recognize because all we're showing here is asphalt, concrete work, some parking meters, and then the necessary drainage to do these types of improvements. We're not showing any trees. We're not showing granite paving. The cost to do this work, the basic backbone of our roadway infrastructure, is approximately $12.4 million over the 6 blocks that we've identified. We initially requested and were approved for that 4.4. We have since gone and found other sources of funding for this particular project in the amount of about $4.8 million. And our request is then to close that gap of $3.2 million. So this is, again, that same percentage breakout. The PPRTA contribution to date represents about 35% of the standard infrastructure cost for the roadway work. We're requesting $3.2 million additional go to these 6 blocks of work, and that would represent 61%. So still, we're leveraging funding even at the local government level. We found other sources of funds that are able to contribute to this work, and still at the basic infrastructure level, the standard infrastructure level, we're leveraging PPRTA dollars in order to make this come together. And then let's add on top of that an additional $10 million from the local or from the business improvement district to do what is exciting, which is the signature lighting, the landscaping, the trees, the granite paving. This is the stuff that citizens are going to be excited about. No one gets excited about asphalt unless you work for a supplier. This is the exciting stuff. This is the stuff that will be memorable for locals and for visitors. This is also the stuff that the district is funding. This is the breakdown side by side. You can see total cost, standard infrastructure cost. There's obviously a greater degree of enhancement that goes to that pedestrian bridge than what's proposed on the roadway of Vermejo and Sierra Madre. Again, our request is 1.15 for the bridge, still under a standard infrastructure or standard bridge cost, and then $3.2 million additional for Vermejo and Sierra Madre, again, still under what standard infrastructure would cost on that street alone. So for a total request of $4.35 million. This next slide was to give Mike opportunity to talk about the status of the PPRTA. I think that you basically heard that presentation already, so I'm going to go ahead and skip forward. And our next speaker will be Bob Cope to talk about the regional impact that this project will have. Good afternoon, board members. Really appreciate the opportunity to talk about this important and impactful project. I'm going to go very quickly through some very large numbers, but just want to give an idea of the magnitude of the economic and fiscal impacts. As Economic Development Officer for the city, I've really learned that my work here and visiting other cities is that public investment breeds private investment. And not all investments in infrastructure are the same. On many of the PPRTA projects, you're able to build and improve roads, and our citizens get the utility of driving on safe roads efficiently, moving people and commerce. In some cases, we improve access, visibility, traffic counts, which provides a little bit of a catalytic spark, which induces some private investment. In this case, we are talking about infrastructure that is really a combination of nitroglycerin and rocket fuel that will result in an explosion of private sector investment of $2 billion. Jeff Fenn, I always appreciate his presentations. He so calmly goes over a $2 billion investment. That is a huge investment in this community and larger than what I've seen in my tenure. What that will result in, ROI for our citizens, about 6,600 new jobs for our citizens. 5,200 of those permanent, 1,300 that would be during the construction period. This would be a 20-year build-out, so construction jobs would occur during that entire period of time. We would grow our economy by about $10 billion over that period of time. So the jobs and the economic growth are economic benefits that our citizens will enjoy that they would not enjoy without this project moving forward. So let's take a look at the fiscal impacts to the city and the county. This investment will result in about $108 million in net new revenue to the city of Colorado Springs if our stovepiped special tax revenues are not sunsetted, if they would happen to be renewed. If they were not renewed, it would be about $76 million. Estimated about $43 million to El Paso County. Again, this is net new tax revenue to the city and the county that would not exist if this project did not move forward. So we're really looking at about $151 million of net new revenue to local governments, $119 million worst case. For this group, it's important to point out that this investment would generate approximately $40 million in net new PPRTA revenue over the 20-year period of time. About half of that occurring on sales just on the project itself, and another $19 million as a result of the employment impacts of those 6,000 new jobs and the spending that they would conduct in the local economy. Take a look at the investment and the overall ROI. The current approved investment is about $8 million. If the request is approved today, that will move to about 12.25. Resulting in about $40 million, again, in net new PPRTA revenue, which is a great ROI just on the PPRTA side. Then when you add the hundreds of millions of dollars in net new city and county revenue, and you look at the new jobs and the $10 billion in economic growth, this is a huge win for our citizens, a huge win for our taxpayers. Okay, with that, I'll let Travis Easton come and wrap up.
Thank you, everybody, for being attentive to our presentation. Bob, where'd that slide go? Okay, this will work. Again, local government is participating in this. We're leading the effort, but that effort is associated with the standard infrastructure improvements. Those elements beyond the standard transportation infrastructure are being funded by the district, so we're partnering with a private entity to do that. It's important to note that investment also leverages at a ratio of 4 to 1. So for every dollar of PPRTA investment, we're leveraging $4 in state funds, city funds, district funds, things of that nature. And that's how you get these projects completed. The requested funds are available. We've talked about the A-list completion. We wouldn't be bringing this forward if there was a question on whether or not the city would be getting the A-list done. We talked about that today. The significant revenue associated with this, $40 million, that's just a PPRTA. We talked about the financial updates today that Beverly brought forward, and I think Chair Geisinger, his response to that was, wow. This will serve only to continue to trend those in the positive direction. So that $40 million over the next 25 years will be used to improve a lot of transportation corridors within the region. Lastly, the revitalization of this area is something, it's an opportunity we have before us. It's implementable. It's already happening. We have an opportunity to bring a civic hub to this area. It's an underutilized area. Bring forth visitors, attractions. Last month, this region was ranked the most desirable place to live in the nation. So we all work and live in the most desirable place to live in the nation. And that is a direct correlation to the amount of infrastructure we put in, the funding and the work associated with that. So I am proud of the work that we're doing as a region, as a city. I'm proud of the work that we're doing on this project. And so I would humbly request that you guys consider this project and the role that you all play as well. And with that, I will close the presentation and turn it back to you guys for questions, and we'll be available.
Mr. Williams.
Travis says the city's lead engineer, I don't remember the official title.
City engineer. But
City engineer, okay, so that was going to work. You've looked at the estimates presented and the cost presented for the basic infrastructure, and you concur that those match, is that correct?
I have not specifically looked at every line item in those.
But you've looked at the general
yes.
category of
Yes.
a pedestrian bridge?
Yes, and the standard elements are, again, what we're requesting funding for.
Okay, thanks.
Mr. Gonzalez. Oh, sorry.
Thank you. No, thank you. So I'm still kind of in awe of the railroad costs in terms of, so they were like unwilling to work with us to minimize costs? I mean,
The 1.1 million?
The airspace costs?
The record should reflect the laughter of Jeff Green.
It's just amazing. I was just,
There's a railroad, and I know.
yeah.
And I can defer to Ryan for any specific questions, but the railroad in general, as Mr. Green just mentioned, they're its own separate entity. It takes a lot of
Yeah.
time and coordination. You have consultants out there that specifically work just with railroads to get through projects like this. When I was in office in Monument, it took us about 3 years to get a quiet zone implemented.
Well, Fountain, same thing.
So
I think
you
it's 5
know.
years, but
Yeah. So
I'm just surprised by that.
So the 1.1
cost,
million, yeah,
Okay.
it's real,
Thanks.
unfortunately.
It's, they're called the People's Republic of Railroads.
Any other questions for any of the presenters? Okay, then we'll return to the board. Oh, Mr. Williams.
No, you return to the board. I presume you're ready for a motion?
Well, the question would be, let's first open to comments, if there's
Okay.
any comments. And then the question, do we want to vote on the pedestrian bridge separate from the streetscape, or do we want to vote on them both together? So comments first, and then we'll go forward. Mr. Williams.
So my comment on this is we're paying for the basic infrastructure. It's already an approved project. It's specifically called out project in the list. Yes, I'm not crazy about the cost of a railroad, but I think it's appropriate because we are paying for basic infrastructure. I would not support Pikes Peak RTA funds for all the wonderful things that they're doing. And when someone else comes to me and says, how come my road didn't get all these cool trees and other stuff, my response is going to be, I will be happy to work with you to set up a district, if that's what you'd like, that would cover the cool little trees, the beautiful swirls and swooshes in a bridge. But we're paying for the basic stuff, and I support this.
Any other comments? Mr. Gonzalez. Ms. Williams.
I think that based upon the amount of sales tax revenue and future revenue it would generate for the county, that I will be voting in favor of the project. I've also spent some considerable time discussing the project with other individuals.
Mr. Gonzalez.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Overall, I'm a little concerned about the increasing costs that we keep seeing, but we've seen that with lots of other projects for the county and the city. The railroad cost was unexpected, and I was briefed up on that a few days ago. But the fact that we need to cover that makes sense, and I do think that we're still just doing the base. Again, I'm concerned about the increasing cost, but I think that this was an unexpected cost. We couldn't get the railroad to give us any deal or work with us, and I think they were unexpected, and so I think they're valid arguments to pay for that. So I think I'll be supporting this. I may not support any future increases because I think, again, this is a project that is starting to get, like West Colorado, a little more expensive than we'd hoped for. But I think the arguments are valid for covering those costs, especially the railroad expenses.
Any other comments? There's one question that I promised to ask. When is the bridge going up? Miss Ivy wants to know when the bridge is going up. Will there be an announcement? We expressed, yes.
I don't think you'll miss it. The intent for the bridge is that it will show up in pieces. It will be assembled on site, and we will move it in place in a very short time frame. So there will be a very public announcement of when that will be happening.
Make sure it's publicized on the PPRTA link so that Miss Ivy can come down from Denver to watch it, because she's quite interested.
Yeah.
All right. Mr. Williams.
Move approval of both increases with respect to the base pedestrian bridge cost increase and the base infrastructure increase for Vermont.
Second.
All in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? And that carries. Much shorter than I thought it would be. Sorry, could have gotten you guys in and out earlier. And there's nothing else, is that correct, Mr. Sonnenberg? We've got everything done? Correct. All right, we are adjourned. Well, you know, I really wanted the meeting to work. Oh, yes. Hey, wait.